Hey everybody, welcome to the webinar. My name's Chris Applegate and I'm a volunteer with the Colorado Sierra Club. And we got Kim Pope with us and also Megan Rast, and they'll be introducing themselves in just a moment. I'm just gonna speak here at the very beginning real quick about some logistics on the webinar. And that is, if you are wanting to ask a question at any moment during the webinar, on the right-hand side of your screen, you will have a chat box where you can ask a question. It'll say submit question or something along those lines there on the right-hand side. You can submit a question there and I'll be able to get it and organize that for Megan and Kim and Anna. And also when you're submitting a question, writing it out, can you be sure to include the city that you're from. I would love to ensure that we're sharing where you all are from tonight as well. And then towards the very end of the webinar, we will have a more open question session where you'll be able to click the little raise your hand button, and that's when you can verbally ask a question. But we're gonna save the verbal questions to the end. But if there's some relevant questions during the webinar that you would like to have answered, I will see about getting those answered during the webinar via the chat box there on the right-hand side. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim, Megan, and Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It looks like we have a good number of people on here. I'm going to get started just by talking a little bit about the objectives of this webinar. So what we're going to talk about and what you're going to learn. So we only have an hour for this webinar. So what we're going to discuss is more general. However, we're always available to answer any more specific questions that you might have. So the first objective is we're going to learn the basics about the Bureau of Land Management's plan to lease 11 parcels of land in Huerfano County, Colorado, for oil and gas production. We're also going to learn the basics of the oil and gas leasing process, which the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, has recently changed. And we're also going to learn about the comment and response process, so how we can all get involved in writing comments to the BLM about these leases. And we're also going to talk a bit about the next steps that you can take to defer or stop this lease sale, including how to write a substantive comment. So moving on, just want to introduce myself. So my name is Kimberly Pope. I am an organizer with the Sierra Club here based in Denver, Colorado. I was born and raised in the Southwest, Silver City, New Mexico in particular. And I spent most of my free time as a kid out on public lands, like I'm sure a lot of us did. My dad is a now retired Forest Service employee who worked on the Gila National Forest, and every weekend of my childhood I spent outdoors. So the public lands in this country, and especially in the West, are really, really important to me. In the past, I've worked in many political fields, from legislative to lobbying and now nonprofit advocacy. And throughout my almost 2 years as an organizing representative with the Sierra Club, I have worked in the community here in Colorado to build widespread support for the permanent protection of Colorado's public lands. So we have this great thing that we're going to do is we're going to ask you guys some questions that you're going to be able to fill out on your own. So the poll is open now. You should see it on your screen. And the question is, have you visited the Great Sand Dunes National Park or the Sangre de Cristo Wilderness before? So we'll give a couple minutes for everybody to answer that question. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So Chris is going to share the results with everyone right now. Looks like most of you have visited both places, which is awesome. So let's move into talking about the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about the specifics. So this oil and gas lease sale, right now, under what the administration is calling an energy dominance mandate, the Bureau of Land Management has put up 11 parcels, which equals 18,358 acres in Huerfano County. These numbers are the numbers of all of the parcels, which you'll see on a map in a second. And these nominated parcels are located on the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo mountain range within the Huerfano River Valley. All of these parcels are no more than 8 miles east of Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, and one of the parcels is less than a mile away of the park and preserve. Several of these parcels for auction are also adjacent to the Sangre de Cristo Wilderness, with one of the parcels directly adjacent to what is known as a roadless area, which is known for its unique wildness. So, as you can see here, this is a map of these parcels. Let me turn on my laser pointer here. So this dark area right here is all of the Great Sand Dunes National Park. These areas over here that are really close to the leases, this is all wilderness. And then these leases are in a valley that is known as the Huerfano River Valley. So as you can see, some of these leases, if there were to be production on them, would be really close to some sensitive areas. And we're going to go into some of the specifics of the impacts in just a moment. So here are a couple pictures that one of our volunteers, Troy Cohn, has taken of the actual lease area. As you can see, it's got some beautiful views and some really undisturbed area. So it would be really unfortunate to lose some of this wildness to oil and gas production. Awesome. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some potential impacts that oil and gas leasing in this area could have. And like I said, this is a very general overview of these potential impacts. You know, there's a lot more specifics that we could go into. And at the end of this, we will send out a fact sheet that has more specifics on these impacts and how you can best utilize these impacts when you write a comment to the BLM. So first of all, this area has some really sensitive wildlife habitat. The parcels overlap some really important habitat for elk and mule deer, including winter concentration areas, severe winter range, as well as calving and fawning areas, which are really critical to the population's health. One of these parcels, in fact, has a significant overlap with a portion of land that has been set aside as a conservation easement through the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So there's definitely some concerns in terms of wildlife. And just today, we talked a little bit more, some more information that came in that this could also affect pronghorn as well as owl habitat as well. So definitely a lot of concerns in terms of wildlife habitat with these leases. The next thing I want to talk about is the impacts to the park and the wilderness itself. So as you can see here, we've got a really great satellite image picture of Great Sand Dunes National Park and the Sangre de Cristo's right here. And this land that you see right here, this is where we would see those oil and gas leases. So as you can see, they are on the other side of a mountain range from Great Sand Dunes National Park, but it's still pretty darn close and still a serious concern for all the beauty that this area provides for people. Some of the things that this could impact in particular is that Great Sand Dunes National Park is considered one of the quietest and possibly also one of the darkest places in the country. Tourists go to the park to enjoy really beautiful night sky views and quiet solitude. And while these parcels for lease are on the eastern side, as you can see here, of the Sangre de Cristo mountain range, development could actually come between a quarter mile of the nature preserve because the preserve does go up here within these mountains. Also, if there is oil and gas development, it would introduce light and noise pollution to that sought-after solitude that many people are visiting the park to experience. Great.
And Anna.
Hello.
Hello. It's we got you up on the screen right now. I would love to have you introduce yourself and
Yeah. Go ahead, Anna. Take it away.
Thank you. Sorry it took me so long to get on. I was having some difficulties with connectivity, as it usually happens here in the Valley. A quick introduction. My name is Ana Lee Vargas, and I am the Director of Project Management and Community Outreach for Conejos Clean Water. We are a 501c3 environmental, social, economic, and food justice organization based in Conejos County. I've been with the organization 3 years, but have long been an advocate for land, water, public health, and I put since I was a niña, since my first language is Spanish. I'm a sixth-generation San Luis Valley native, direct descendant of Don Diego de Vargas on my father's side, and I actually have indigenous roots on my mother's side of Jicarilla Apache and also Picorist. So, I mean, I've been all over the world with my advocacy, not all over the world, all over the lower 48, with advocacy from DC to UC Berkeley. So thank you for letting me be on the panel. I really appreciate it. Okay, so talking as a San Luis Valley native and environmental justice director for CCW, I listed some potential impacts. So my first one, of course, is water quality. We are Conejos Clean Water, founded on Agua es Vida. Water is our life source. So the proposed areas, the parcels that we've been talking about, the proposed area encompasses the entire headwaters of the upper Huerfano River Basin. So it does not, none of the parcels are included in our Rio Grande Basin here in the San Luis Valley. However, the concerns are, of course, with water resources in the lease areas, including Rough Creek, Muddy Creek. I mean, there's a whole list: Pantaloon Creek, North and South May Creek, Potato Creek, Ritoso Creek, Sheep Creek, Stanton Creek, Manzanares Creek, the Montes Ditch, and of course the Huerfano River. I also included Upper Medano Creek because parcel number 8080 and 8086 are also in close proximity to Upper Medano Creek. Upper Medano Creek is the creek that flows through the sand dunes. So, of course, when we're talking about water quality, one of our main concerns is the health of not only the rivers and the watersheds and everything in Huerfano County, but also in the San Luis Valley. Talking a little bit about air quality, in the San Luis Valley, we have a higher rate of childhood asthma, 14% in the San Luis Valley, compared to 10% in the greater Colorado. So anybody that lives here in the valley, we know that when I always say there's a forest fire or something nearby because of the winds that carry everything from east to west, from cold to depression, because of the fault lines that run down from the San Cristo mountain range. The wind goes over east to west and settles a lot in the San Luis Valley. So like I said, we can always tell whether there's fire nearby or anything just by looking outside. We also have a higher rate of COPD, a lot of pulmonary diseases. So when I'm talking about public health, I'm talking also about air quality, of course, the asthma, but also about endocrine disruption. So I know this is kind of strange, but the endocrine disruption, exchange identifies over 1,400 chemicals used in oil and gas operation as endocrine disruptors. And those can be carried through water and through air. Cultural impacts, and these are the ones that are most, these are closest to my heart. The north half of the Wolf Springs Ranch, where 6 of the parcels are located, well, not on the North Spring Ranch, so let me rephrase that. North half of Wolf Springs Ranch, was purchased by the Navajo Nation for special ceremonies, food, sustenance, and of course recreation. And they also purchased the north half for the unobstructed view of Cisna, and it's Jini, which is our Sierra Blanca or our Mount Blanca. So those are some of the cultural impacts. However, not just talking about the Navajo Nation or the Dene, but we're also talking about our sand dunes, which are culturally significant to our San Luis Valley natives, as well as tourism. Last year we had 344,000 visitors to our park, with a projection of 400,000 this next year. So, this is really a lot of our impacts in the San Luis Valley that we are concerned with.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. We really appreciate it. And yeah, that was great information. So next, we're going to go into talking a little bit about the potential impacts covering that drilling could cause to this area. You know, some of these I'm sure all of you know already as Colorado natives and people who care about the environment, but thought you would talk about it anyway. Effects of drilling these areas could be increased air pollution, contamination of the regional watershed, removal of extremely sensitive topsoil leading to widespread erosion and permanent damage to the land. Also, outside of reducing access to tourists, as well as hunters and anglers, and the revenue they bring, drilling typically causes truck traffic. It can damage local roads. It uses a ton of water. And an increase in dust and pollution particles, and an increased intensity and frequency of seismic activity. So the next slide we have here is talking about how the Bureau of Land Management has changed their oil and gas leasing process. So this little slide here shows what the old process was. So as you can see here, in red are all of the steps that the BLM takes to put parcels up for auction, and in blue are the opportunities for the public to provide input on whether they would like to protest these leases, whether they feel like the leases were not, or the area was not properly surveyed and impacts were not taken into consideration. And as you can see here, we've got two 30-day guaranteed public comment periods. This is the old process. The new process that was recently changed eliminates most of those opportunities for public comments. So as you can see here, the only guaranteed opportunity in this new leasing process for the public to be able to comment is during a 10-day protest period, which for these leases starts on July 20th. However, each BLM field office is allowed to decide whether or not they want to provide an opportunity for public comment in the environmental assessment phase, which is what we are in right now for these leases. However, they are not required to do that. So, you know, the Royal Gorge field office was kind enough to give us 15 days to comment on the environmental assessment that they were. Whereas, as you can see here, really we're only guaranteed 10 days anymore. So moving on, we're going to do a little bit of a training on how to write a comment, what it means, and I'm going to kick it over to Megan.
Hi, everybody. So I have a little intro slide, just like the others. I think it's really important to know who's speaking to you and their experience. So I've been working in the environmental field for about 15 years. I was actually born in Colorado, and I'm really humbled, Anna, to have you on the phone because I think you're a true Coloradan. Even though I was born here, I've only been back for about a year. But I've been doing environmental field work for about 15 years, and it's taken me from field research in the South African bush to, and it's in bold on purpose, being a contractor to the EPA in Washington, D.C., and I went to business school so I could actually translate that experience into the corporate sector. So what really matters today is I was a contractor to the EPA in DC. So I was the person who actually helped write the comment response documents that for a sort of longer rulemaking have to get published into the Federal Register. So with that, I think we have a poll, another little interactive opportunity to get to know you guys. So have you ever submitted a public comment to a federal land management agency before? And that could be anything that any of the federal offices in the administrative piece. So EPA, BLM,
Forest Service.
Give it just another second for folks to weigh in. We want to give everyone the opportunity. All right. So thanks. Let's see where Chris is going to show the results. All right. So 59% said yes and 41% said no. Okay. Very helpful. We weren't sure if we were going to have all experts on the phone or some folks who still have this opportunity to grow. So one of the things, I think we'll go to the next slide. If you've been engaged, particularly since in kind of the current administration era, you've probably been doing a lot of calls to your members of Congress. So for kind of translation, we're talking about the federal side, which is really administrative, meaning underneath the, ultimately politically the White House. But there's a lot of different agencies that kind of fold into that side. And so I like to take this opportunity to say there's a lot of view of the federal government, particularly the way we talk about our federal government and how it works. And so oftentimes people think maybe the federal government is in the way, right? They're just a creator of red tape. There's a lot of processes, and that can be viewed in a negative light. But I'd like to point out the government has these processes intentionally, and it's often to make sure that there's adequate feedback and process in place so that we are listening as a government to the people, right? And that there's attempts at being more equitable in that stakeholder representation. So certainly there's more opportunities to improve, but what can be seen as red tape is actually often about making sure sort of the people's voice is being heard throughout the process. And so the next slide I like to point out, as someone who actually worked as a contractor to folks in the federal government, this is how the view is from the inside, right? So people are, a lot of them have strong expertise and maybe of a technical nature that they've been working in that area, inside their agency, inside the division within that agency, and built up a lot of institutional knowledge. They're very proud to be that civil servant. And so if you kind of peek under the hood of what it looks like inside a federal agency, the political appointees, so essentially the people that change when the White House changes, are really only at the very top. So there's a whole lot of people who are throughout these organizations. And as an example, I worked on a rulemaking for the EPA. I mentioned that comment response document. I supported a technical work group of experts from across the agency, and it was oil and gas related, and they were all folks, no political appointees. The political appointees were actually many layers up from sort of the work that was being done. So I like to give them a little shout out, especially in the current situation, right? They're dedicated professionals. They're likely as disheartened and or frustrated as you are, if not more so. I certainly feel like in today's news, we get stories all the time about some of these folks who have decided to leave. So keep that in mind about why your comments matter. So yeah, we'll go to the next slide. So how to leverage the process, right? So now we know why the process exists. It's meant to try to provide opportunities for the public's voices to be heard, as well as technical expertise to be incorporated. So in this case, it's a little bit different than a rulemaking, which of course is my expertise. But again, the BLM, as mentioned by Kim, has to solicit comments. Even within that shortened time frame, there is a code that requires these agencies to provide that comment. Certainly it doesn't specify the length, which is why they're starting to change the length. And then so the second bullet, typically the BLM must create a comment and response document. The oil and gas leasing process is a little bit different, but they do have to address the points received in the comment process. So in the new process, the kind of key term is they have to resolve protests within 35 days. And so, there's a little bit of ambiguity in the way that they're currently talking about it, meaning, if we were talking about a rulemaking, the Code of Federal Regulations is very clear that agencies have to address every comment received. But again, in this case, they have to resolve protests. So keep that in mind, which is, one of the reasons to have more substantiated comments is that will provide more sort of oomph, more rationale that requires the BLM to actually resolve that protest. So and then the more comments that the civil servants kind of receive, the folks inside the government, the more significant is the need to resolve, right? So this is one of those spots where you might feel like, what does my voice add? But if you're a voice with a big chorus of people saying the same thing, it becomes all the more imperative for the agency to respond. And so a goal always is to try to get more comments than ever before, right? Especially when you have a situation where there's been precedent, right? And if there's been precedent around the agency perhaps taking a different choice, right? If they've received more comments on this than they've received in the past, whether it's for this specific geography or whether it's for a very similar geography of oil and gas leasing elsewhere, right? It lends a lot of credence to the folks inside the BLM who are trying to make sure that again, the resolution of protests is adequately happening. And then, of course, higher quality comments that are differentiated and researched. The reason why that matters, again, as someone who used to have to read and create a comment response document, is that individualized comments have to be individually read. And the higher quality they are, meaning the more they reference scientific material, the more they're differentiated, sort of the better the process is. Keep in mind, especially with folks who are experts in the region or have a personal tie, that's one way to make a individualized comment. A lot of you mentioned that you've been to these two places, so make sure you lead with that, passion and the fact that you've been to these spaces, but also make sure to incorporate a lot of the kind of information you heard earlier from Kim. And then finally, in this case, you saw the old process and the new process, and I think it's a really valid included point to make sure that there was a change in how long the public kind of gets to be heard within this process, and the way that it was announced, it was very kind of silently changed from 30 to 15 days, the opportunity to comment. And so make sure that you point that out, right, because that puts into the public record a comment that says, hey, why did it change? Why is it lesser? Maybe there's a burden, right? It was really hard for you to drop everything and get that comment in. Anything of that nature will really help. So some scenarios to consider. Again, this is just like the why does my comment matter? If the comment process isn't followed, then it can be more easily fought in court, potentially vacated. In terms of oil and gas leases, very different than rulemaking, but that definitely has happened. And then really the key can become the agency was previously on record saying one thing and then contradicts itself. That can be more easily fought in court and potentially vacated. And then again, changing the process is really the key, can become some of the key problem that the agency is entering into. And so changing the process such that it restricts the opportunity for the public to engage, right? The fact that they've kind of shortened the process without giving us adequate notice. This can all be important information to incorporate into your comment so that it can result in the process being challenged. So again, remember the principles, embrace the process. You're helping by speaking up and giving your voice. So create a public record for future court actions. Sierra Club makes it easy. We're going to show you this link again later, but there is an action alert webpage where there's some pre-written comment, but again, keep in mind to the third point, increase the volume of unique entries. So, take the language from Sierra Club that's provided at that action alert. And if you are someone who has already submitted a comment, you can submit again, but they have to be individualized. And the key, again, as someone who's read these comments, you'll indicate that it's a differentiated individual comment if you change particularly the beginning. So in the action alert, you'll have the opportunity to type in the box. And so, again, a lot of you are on your computers. You'll see this link again, but you're welcome to the extent you can, right? Open up a new browser, and so you can start seeing what I'm referring to. But yeah, make sure to add something personal. Make sure to make it unique. Make sure to make it, and again, to the fourth point, research, reference the good sources, reference the information material you've heard on today's webinar. And so, yeah. I think with that, we have a poll, correct?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, we actually only have until Friday to submit our unique comments on the environmental assessment that the BLM has put forth. We were given 15 days starting from March 22nd to this Friday. So what you can do is go back into that action alert and, as Megan mentioned, delete out or edit what we have already provided to provide a unique comment. And we will also be sending out information after this with everything that we covered in terms of the potential impacts written down for you, so you can reference that and use that information when writing your unique comment. But after that comment period is over, that doesn't mean that our fight is over. So here are some other options on this list of things that you can do moving forward to help us make sure that we're continuing to get the word out about how this is happening and that we would like to see it stopped. So fill out the poll that I believe Chris has up right now, and let us know what you're willing to do. Great. Also, if you have any questions, we're going to start leading into that portion of the webinar. So you're welcome to type it into the chat box. Great. Awesome. Well, it looks like we've got a lot of people who are super excited to take a next action. Like I mentioned, after this webinar, which is being recorded, we will also be sending out information that includes all of these potential impacts in more detail that you can use to reference when writing your unique comment. We also will have letters to the editor templates that you're welcome to use or write your own, whichever you prefer. And also, moving forward, we're going to be sending out more information to everybody who's really passionate about this, about our next steps on this work.
All right. Kim, I'm going to throw our last poll up, but I'm also going to be taking some questions for folks, for you, Megan and Anna here. So I'm going to just launch another poll while I get the first question here. This is from Debbie. Aren't the political appointees at the top of the agencies the ones open that are creating the environmental chaos?
So I mean, chaos, yes. I think back to the civil servant side is like what we're starting to see, unfortunately, is that there's a lot of expertise, people, not just in environmental agencies, but right, if you think about some of the other agencies, people are leaving as a result of, you know, what you call chaos, I'd call a little bit more, you know, these are folks who are trying to serve, they don't necessarily serve an administration, they serve the Constitution, right? They serve the mission of that agency. And so, yeah, I certainly think, you know, for transparency, I was the EPA contractor during the Bush years, right? Which could be similarly viewed, although it's, of course, a different administration with some different tactics. But what ends up happening is that there's only so many things that even the political appointees can really take on and accomplish in terms of driving change. So yeah, back to the reason why comments matter is that, you know, oftentimes there's, I'll call it internal negotiation inside the agencies for what they're actually going to take on and vice versa, what they don't have bandwidth and capacity to take on. And so, you know, in this case, they're certainly trying to open up a lot of oil and gas leasing. The parcels that we're talking about tonight have not been previously for sale. So we're certainly seeing that's like something new that sort of the current administration is doing that has not been done in the past. But I think it's also indicative of, you know, what was the name? The energy mandate.
Yeah, energy dominance mandate.
Energy dominance mandate. They're clearly, that's really kind of the driving thrust. And so we're trying our best here in Sierra Club to make sure we're focused on the places where we can really drive and kind of push back from some of these new threats. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share the results of our question here, but we also have another question here. This one's pretty easy. This is also from Debbie. She is from north of Westcliff.
Great.
Are they going to drill on the Navajo Nation property that was just purchased?
As far as we know, no, they are not. The leases that are on private land that are part of the ranch that is there are owned by a different person. And I don't know if Anna wants to add to that. She might have a little bit more information.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. No, the parcels, 6 of the 11 parcels are all on the Wolf Springs Ranch on the south side. That is private land, none on the Navajo Nation side.
Great.
All right, thank you. We also have a question from Rick. How do you stay up to date on all these BLM actions that are always taking place? It seems like they do not provide much notice.
Yes, yeah, that is correct. It's really hard to keep up with it. The best suggestion that I can give is to go onto the BLM website. They do post on that website all of the oil and gas leases that they have up for auction. They're doing it in, I believe it's a 3-month period. Every 3 months they have certain leases up for auction, and they have that all listed on their website. And that website is something that we can include in our follow-up email to everybody.
And to tie it to the volunteer, this is Megan, just to say, Kim's thinking like a full-time Sierra Club employee.
Yes, true.
You can also join the Our Wild America campaign. I know personally, I don't have enough bandwidth to personally like visit all these sites, but Our Wild America campaign, participating in that activity with the Sierra Club is a way that I make sure I'm up to date on what's happening and what's most important, because they do a lot of good work to try to filter through all of that information.
Great. We got another question from Molly from Westcliff. What, if anything, has been the response of the Navajo Nation? And I think maybe Anna might know a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I have been in contact with the Navajo Nation, and they weren't included in the environmental assessment. However, they have been contacted and are working with the BLM currently to provide them with their comments, and they are in touch with the Royal Gorge Field Office, so they are now part of the process. However, they weren't included in the EA.
Yeah, which is definitely a concern that we can also comment on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. We got another question from Sarah. She wants a little bit more clarification on how the public comment period has changed to 15 days or to 10 days.
Yeah, so to clarify, so the slide with Kim that went from 60 days to 10 days, that's referring to the protest period. So right now, what happened was that it's within each agency's discretion whether they actually allow for comments to be received on the environmental assessment. So what happened was the 15 days is what the period we're currently in, where we are allowed, the agency did decide to provide an opportunity for comment on the environmental assessment. And it's technically not showing up in this as a blue box because it's actually not a required step. So in terms of the rules, the agency only has to provide a 10-day comment period during the protest period. But the 15 days is what we now have, and that's, again, optional. So back to things that you should incorporate into your comment. Going from 60 days where there was 2 clear 30-day periods where the public could comment down to 10 days where it's only really required at one point in the process is certainly not a good, in my opinion, opportunity for the public to weigh in and to really be heard in this process, and should be incorporated into your comments.
Thank you, Megan. Amy from Colorado Springs. What type of oil and gas operations would these be on these parcels? Hydraulic fracturing, traditional oil drilling?
So as far as we know, the operations would be natural gas or CO2, so no oil that we know of.
Great. We also have a question from Mary. I don't know if we can properly speak for the people, but Mary asked, what are the opinions and feelings of the people in Westcliff and Silvercliff on this development? And I know we've seen a few people from that area asking questions. I don't know if you, Anna, or you, Kim, would like to share anything with some of the communication and partners we've been talking with.
Yeah, I mean, I can kick it off. So we have been collaborating with several groups in the area. One in particular is the citizens of Huerfano County, who we're actually going to meet with this week to talk about these leases. But in terms of beyond that, I mean, people in the San Luis Valley are aware, people in the area are aware. That's what we provided this for, is to inform everyone. But yeah, I can't speak for anyone else but myself.
Anything to add on that?
Well, just kind of to what Kim said, we've been in touch with friends of Huerfano County, and we've been on several calls with them. The county commissioners have been informed, so we've been working closely with them. And on our side in the San Luis Valley, of course, we've put out LPs, op-eds, articles. We've been on CARES-EA. We've tried to get the word out in the San Luis Valley as much as possible to take part in the public process. We've also been in contact with Friends of the Dunes. So they're writing a comment against the oil and gas leases, asking them to be withdrawn. We've also been working closely with National Park Service here in the San Luis Valley and our other agencies. So I can't speak for like the other portions, but yeah, Huerfano County we've been in contact with.
Thank you both. We got a question from Brendan. They are a graduate student and they love writing more scientific articles. So when they're submitting comments to the BLM, is it okay? Should they go for more technical format, or should they do more of a general approach?
So in terms of a typical comment response document, if you think about the most highly researched, organized comments actually do have references to scientific materials. So to the extent that you have those articles or can reference those articles, that is all really good in terms of, again, making a really substantial, well-researched comment. So I think I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed on the phone if they don't have that kind of background. Certainly the goal is just to make a differentiated comment. But yeah, to the extent that you have that experience and you're comfortable with doing it, it actually is something that increases the substantiated comments. And technically, again, it's a kind of a new process where they've changed it a little bit, so we're not totally sure. But in kind of the typical world where they did comment response documentation, we do have to actually look to those additional technical pieces to see if there's, it's, again, an argument that they have to kind of overcome.
Thank you, Megan. Dave has a question. What are the impacts going to be on wildlife?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the biggest impact that I can say, just from what I know, is the impacts to migration areas and calving and fawning areas of big game. So there's a lot of elk and a lot of mule deer in the region that use this valley as an area for migration and also calving and fawning. So that will be a huge impact. If there were to be development there, that would mess up their migration patterns.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Is there, this is from Ross in Pueblo, is there likely to be a legal challenge if the EA produces a FONSI?
So that is something that I don't personally have knowledge on. We do have a Sierra Club lawyer who is working on this. I'll let Megan talk a little bit more. I don't know. I do not know the answer to that, but I can get you the answer. We work mostly on the grassroots side, so encouraging people to put in their own comment. Our lawyers are the ones that cover most of that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Eric asks if there's a particular format that is most affected for comments, like footnoted studies, direct experience, a combination.
Yeah, so if you look at when you go to the link, the action alert for this with Sierra Club, you can see the comment that's pre-populated. And from a format perspective, that certainly is a great way to begin. As kind of touched on earlier, if you are comfortable with scientific referencing technical documents and things of that nature, go forth and do that. And I said, make sure that you have something differentiated at the beginning. So even if you just have a couple sentences at the beginning that talk about your own personal experience, right? I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible on the phone to different ranges of people's sort of comfort levels, but make sure that really if you're going to make it differentiated, you do it at the beginning of that comment, because that will show up as, that will be more likely to be seen as a unique comment. But yeah, to the extent that you can have something well researched, certainly the information, again, that we've gone through today, you know, to the extent that it's probably not all as detailed in the action alert. So you're welcome to expand upon the places where you really think is the most important, or again, connects to you personally, or to the extent that you have kind of that scientific comfort level. I mean, go for it.
Great, thank you. We also have Mary asking a question about should we leave out certain terms like the term global warming or other terms like that out of such comments?
So I take it, I mean, I kind of see where you're getting, which is maybe, you know, if I don't say it, maybe that's a higher likelihood. The truth is you should comment about, you know, climate change. I would use, just from a scientific standpoint, I'd use climate change over global warming, but, you know, use the terms that you're comfortable with. It's your comment. And I sort of, to the extent that, again, there's some scientific basis or some personal basis, I wouldn't shy away from using terminology. You're a member of the public. This is the opportunity for the public to comment, and your voice matters, and this is the place where it gets heard. So if it's something that you're concerned about, right, don't let the, you know, I don't even want to say potential, like we all kind of know where the administration might land on certain things, but this is you, this is about your voice and about your voice mattering. So don't lessen your voice just because you're not sure it's going to be heard. Say what you want to say, and use the terms you want to use, and that's, you know, I guess the most important part of this kind of conversation.
Thank you. And I will just say we do have about 12 minutes left, and I'm going to try and make it through as many of these questions because there's, I think, about 15 questions here, folks. Great and wonderful questions, but I am working through them here. So we also have Tanya asking about how were these parcels identified for leasing? Was it the Texas Oil Company, which is, for reference to folks, is a company that is interested in these leases, or was it from the BLM, Kim?
Yeah, so
Anna,
yeah,
so.
the way that they do it is they somebody sends a letter of interest in nominating certain parcels to be auctioned off by the BLM. So the BLM takes these nomination letters that generally come from companies and review those and then just determine the parcels. So that's the easy answer.
Great. There was also another question from Molly from West Cliff about what is the best way to submit a comment? Is it through the website, or is it through email, or should we write to them?
So if you submit it through the website, it will get electronically submitted into like the federal kind of comment sort of spot. That's like one of the benefits of Sierra Club, is makes it easy for you to submit your comment. So yeah, I mean, if you're, you know, want to roll up your sleeves and learn how to do it online, there is another way to do it, but I'd really recommend the Sierra Club, because at the end of the day, it ends up having the same kind of impact when your comments get submitted into the agency for review. So, you know, keep it easy on yourself and go to the link.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. So there's another question from Linda and David. They're from Custer County, just southeast of West Cliff.
Awesome. And
they're asking, you know, how will these products be transported off-site? By pipeline? And I'm going to add on to that question because there is some issue with whether or not they'll even find resources in the first place in these areas to even transport any of those.
Yeah, so I'm not fully up on how the process works in terms of the actual drilling. However, I do know that in the area where these parcels are, there has never been any oil and gas drills in the area. There's no wells in the area that are producing. And in the past, there's been very few areas where there are wells that actually have found anything. So we are not even sure on the potential for them actually finding any resources in this area.
Great. So Eric's asking whether or not a Freedom of Information Act request will be made or not for this.
Yeah, Anna, I believe we have partners that have put that in, if I'm correct. Do you know for certain, Anna?
I think they have, but I'd have to double check. I know that came up in one of our email threads. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they have, but I'd have to double check.
Yeah, that's something we can follow up with, but
yeah,
something that I'm pretty sure we're working in a coalition of groups to write technical comments and manage the legal side of this. So yeah, I would lean more towards yes.
Great. David is asking whether or not there's the Dakota aquifer in the area, and has issues been brought up about those concerns to what he's calling the largest aquifer in the country, which or any water issues in general. Have those things been brought up?
Yeah, so in our technical comments that we are working with our partners to submit, they have actually requested that the BLM do a hydrological study of the area before auctioning off the leases. So that is definitely something that we're keeping in mind.
Great. We got Matthew asking, where do the Huerfano County commissioners stand on this?
So that is something that we are still determining. As of yet, we've had our partners, citizens of Huerfano County, reach out to the county commissioners, but nobody has given us a firm stance yet. But that is something that, as we continue through this process, we're going to encourage citizens of Huerfano County to contact those commissioners and let them know your concerns.
Great. We got Donna asking, when was the comment period shortened? And is there someone we should contact about that in addition to our comment about the leasing?
It was shortened this goes back to the kind of silently, like they kind of changed the process, and I guess I'll put that slide back up again. They changed that process without a whole lot of fanfare. From, having, this was kind of during the previous administration, like the opportunity for comment, right, a bit longer to this process. So I think, in terms of places where you can have an impact, incorporate in your comment, especially since the deadline is Friday. So please make sure to, again, this is an opportunity to put your comment and your thoughts into the public record. So I think it's really important to incorporate the kind of frustration, right, around the process changing and being shortened there. One of the places you can also do, and this was, I think we had it as a poll, so I don't know how much it landed on the screen. Oops, but there's places you can actually contact your officials. So if you want to contact folks like members of Congress or your state representative or state senator, you can certainly raise the issue about the comment period shortening, but you'd also want to ask them to tell the BLM to stop the sale. And so maybe a combination of those two things are the most impactful if you're reaching out to kind of the legislative side, either in the state or in DC.
Great, thank you. So there's been a couple of different questions from a few different folks on this, but has there been any outreach to those that might own conservation easements in the area or land trust organizations within the area?
I'm not aware of if that is an issue in the area right now. I do know that we have been in contact with people in the county, but since part of these parcels are on BLM land and the other majority of them are actually on private land, we have not reached out to any land easement organizations. However, Anna, do you know of any that y'all have reached out to?
No, we haven't. We don't have. let's see. I don't have knowledge of any environmental easements in that area. However, I mean, that's a good thing to look into, because we looked at our easements here, however, not in Huerfano County or where the parcels are located, especially not on the private side.
Yeah, so we appreciate that question. Thank you for cluing us into what we need to look into.
Great,
yeah,
thank you.
Put it on our radar.
I have another question on, so after this comment period is over, you know, Anna, Kim, like, what in the world are we going to do to continue to encourage them to withdraw these oil and gas leases? And this is from Suzanne from Crestone.
Great. Well, I think a good step is some of the things that we've listed here that's up right now. Something that I'm quickly learning in this process is that there are a lot of different ways to influence the BLM to stop the lease sales. I'm not sure if some of you are aware of, recently the BLM actually took or deferred leases that were going up for auction near Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And there was a huge grassroots effort to stop that. And I think it's a combination of contacting other influential people within your community. So as we mentioned here, your member of Congress, your state representative, your county commissioners, the governor, asking them to write a letter to the BLM about these leases, and also talking to people in your community and spreading the word, because the more that the BLM knows that people are concerned about this, the more likely we are to have the leases pulled. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, but all of it, I think, sums up to just making your voice heard and contacting as many people as you can.
And timeline-wise, there is the protest that'll open up in July. So
Yes.
We actually are trying to maintain a concerted effort after the comment period closes until July, the protest period. So yeah, keep it on your radar. Keep doing these actions.
Yep.
Well, I want to say thank you to Anna, to Kim, and to Megan. We only have a couple of minutes left. We do have quite a few still unanswered questions, but because you wrote them, we're going to be able to get back to you about them. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back to you between tomorrow or maybe the next day to get your answers as quickly as possible. You have also been shared in the chat box a link to the sierraclub.org, the Colorado Sierra Club website, where on the public lands page, we have put examples to letters to the editor. We've put an info sheet where you can get some more technical comments to add to your own comments. We've added the link to the petition that gets submitted right to the BLM Royal Gorge office. And we've also included an interactive map of where the oil and gas leases are. This is all located online, and this is where the webinar is going to go as well. And there's been questions about the slides. We will make these available on the website immediately after this webinar. All of that information will be uploaded before 10 o'clock tonight. So, yeah, Anna.
Sorry. Sorry, could I add something? Also,
Yeah,
we put together some outreach material, so which is an example of an outreach letter for the parcels are located, what we've asked of the BLM, and we've been disseminating that. So if anybody wants the outreach material that we put together, also they're welcome to contact me, and I can email it to them in PDF form or however they want. But that's also helpful for any folks that are on the call here in the SLV. Because we really do have quite a few points on there of how it impacts the sand dunes, how it impacts our water here in the SLV, how it just impacts our culture. So, like I said, it's kind of, it's good outreach material for anybody that wants it.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, and everybody. I'll be able to put, they'll be in a follow-up email with everyone's contact, as well as that will be on the website, so that you can just have one place on a website to go and find Anna's email and so forth. For those of you in the West Cliff area and over in Crestone and so forth, there's a few of us that will be down this weekend. Kim and I will be down with a few other volunteers to the area. So if you're available, please reach out to us. We'd love to meet you in person. And Kim, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Like I said, we will make sure to answer your questions and also provide you with as much information as we can. And everybody get in that unique comment before Friday.
Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful night. And let's go stop this lease sale.
Woo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.